Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into 75 years of Formula One evolution. And really, it's a sport that's all about one thing: relentless, high-speed revolution.
So how exactly do you get from gentlemen racers wrestling these massive cars on tracks that are literally lined with hay bales
To this, a multi-billion-dollar spectacle lighting up the Las Vegas Strip? I mean, the transformation is just staggering, right? The journey from what was a pretty niche European pastime into this global entertainment juggernaut has been driven by technology, by money, and at times by tragedy.
Because at its heart, that's what it's always been about. This is the core DNA of Formula One. This relentless, obsessive pursuit of speed has been the catalyst for every single major change in the sport's history.
Okay, let's jump in. We're starting with the Titans and front engines, the 1950s, which you could call the age of power and purity. And we're going right back to the beginning, 1950, Silverstone, the first ever World Championship race.
So, what did the grid look like back then? Well, the cars were basically pre-war designs. We're talking massive front-engine beasts. Aerodynamics? Not really a thing yet. It was all about raw brute power. The calendar was tiny, just 7 races, mostly in Europe. And the whole decade was completely dominated by one man, the legendary Juan Manuel Fangio. Get this, he won 5 championships with 4 different teams. That kind of adaptability is, well, it's still just mind-boggling today.
Okay, moving into the 60s. This is the era of engines, wings, and garagists. And this is really where we see the blueprint for the modern F1 car start to take shape. Because that established order, these giant manufacturers, it was about to get totally flipped on its head. And not by another huge company, but by a tiny British team literally working out of a garage. Enzo Ferrari famously said, "The horse pulls the cart, it does not push it." He was of course talking about the engine. He hated the idea of putting it in the back of the car, but he was famously, spectacularly wrong. This new rear engine layout, pioneered by Cooper cars, made the cars way lighter, much more nimble, and just a whole lot faster in the corners. And guess what? By 1961, just a couple years after it showed up, the entire grid was using it. Even Ferrari had to give in.
And then this happened. The Cosworth DFV engine. You can make a very strong argument that this is the single most important engine in F1 history. See, before the DFV, you had to be a huge manufacturer building your own engine and your own chassis to even have a shot at winning. But this engine, it was powerful, lightweight, and most importantly, any team could just go out and buy one. Suddenly, these small, independent teams, the garagists as they were called, could buy a DFV, build a simple chassis around it, and actually go head-to-head with Ferrari. It totally democratized the grid, a complete game changer.
So now that everyone's got the power, how do you go even faster? Well, you start playing with the air. Teams started literally bolting wings onto their cars for more cornering grip. But the first attempts were, well, they were terrifying. These giant wings on these spindly little struts would just snap, causing these massive, horrible accidents. It sparked a real safety crisis, and one driver, a guy named Jackie Stewart, decided enough was enough. He started a crusade for things we take for granted now, like proper barriers and medical teams, a crusade that would end up saving countless lives. And that brings us to the 70s and 80s, the era of ground effects and turbo wars. This is the pursuit of extremes. Seriously, as engineers really started to figure out aerodynamics and just unbelievable engine power, F1 went into its wildest, most dangerous phase yet. The big breakthrough was from Lotus. It was called ground effect. The idea was to shape the side pods of the car like an upside-down airplane wing. Then they'd add these sliding skirts to seal the edges to the track. What did that do? It created this massive low-pressure zone that just sucked the car to the ground. The cornering speeds were insane, but, and this is a big but, the cars were so volatile. If that seal with the track broke for even a split second, you'd lose all your grip instantly. It made them incredibly dangerous and just punishing to drive.
And while all this aero madness was happening, the engine power was going completely off the charts. We're talking about the turbo era. At first, everyone mocked them as unreliable, but soon they were making over 1,000 horsepower. And for qualifying, some teams had these special grenade engines, nicknamed that because they'd only last a lap or two, that were pushing close to 1,400 horsepower. I mean, can you even imagine trying to hang on to that much power?
So you have these incredibly fast, incredibly dangerous cars. And that backdrop gave us the sport's most legendary rivalry. It was Alain Prost, the professor, the ultimate calculating chess master, versus Ayrton Senna, who was just magic.
pure, raw speed, almost a mystical force of nature. They were teammates at McLaren, and their fight for the championship became one of the most bitter, most captivating stories in the history of any sport.
But this leads us to a really difficult period. The section is called Tragedy, Tech, and Safety because in 1994, it all came to a head. That relentless chase for speed, now combined with an electronic arms race, we're talking active suspension, traction control, it all led the sport to its absolute darkest weekend.
See, for 1994, the FIA banned all those electronic driver aids, and overnight the cars became incredibly twitchy and difficult to drive. The result was the San Marino Grand Prix at Imola. On Friday, Rubens Barrichello had a terrifying crash he was lucky to survive. On Saturday, a rookie driver, Roland Ratzenberger, was killed in qualifying. And then, on Sunday, the unthinkable happened. The whole world watched as Ayrton Senna, the sport's biggest star, maybe the greatest driver ever, crashed from the lead and was killed.
Losing Senna was a shock to the system that the sport just couldn't ignore. It forced a total, non-negotiable shift in culture towards safety. Everything changed. That single weekend directly led to so many things we see today. Wooden planks under the cars to control them, higher cockpit sides to protect the driver's head, entire circuits being redesigned. It sparked the revolution that gave us things like the HNS device and the super strong carbon fiber survival cells that drivers sit in now. So now we move into the modern era, hybrids, media, and superstardom. Because out of that awful tragedy, Formula One rebuilt itself. It became safer, way more professional, and in the end, a much more valuable global brand.
The next huge revolution wasn't something you could see on the outside. It was under the engine cover. In 2014, F1 switched to these insanely complex hybrid power units, and one team, Mercedes, just nailed the formula. Their mastery of this tech was so total that it kicked off the single most dominant run in the history of the sport. We're talking 8 consecutive Constructors' Championships. 8! It was just unbelievable.
And right around that time, something else huge was happening off the track. New owners, Liberty Media, came in and completely rewrote the playbook for how to sell the sport. They leaned into social media, they focused on growing the American market, and they created a little show called Drive to Survive. And that was a game changer. It opened up Formula One to a whole new generation of fans and turned it into the global entertainment juggernaut it is today.
But if we've learned anything, it's that Formula One never stands still. It's just in its DNA. So of course, the next big F1 revolution is already on its way. We're looking at 2026, later, louder, and a lot more electric.
So what's coming in 2026? Well, the new rules are basically trying to fix what a lot of people see as the biggest problems with the current cars. They're just too big and too heavy. The goal is to make them lighter and more nimble to make the racing better. They're going to do this with some really cool active aerodynamics. Think wings that move on the straights and in the corners. And the power unit is getting a major overhaul. We're looking at a nearly 50-50 split between the traditional engine and electric power. Oh, and it's all going to run on 100% sustainable fuel.
So that's the big question, right? After 75 years of non-stop change, what will that next arms race for the next tenth of a second even look like? We've gone from those front-engine monsters sliding around Silverstone to these hybrid marvels tearing down the Las Vegas Strip. The whole story of Formula One is just one of constant, relentless evolution. And if there's one thing we know for sure, it's that the revolution, it never, ever stops.